refreshing of travel plans, school travel plans that are a basic part of the network and have been sadly neglected. I say that again, sadly neglected of the schools that I know in my ward and the travel plans that many of which are now decades old. So my dilemma, Mr. Chair, is that while I support the spending and I support cycling, I have a real concern around the bang for the buck that we're going to get for $2 billion, a real issue around that, and I have a real issue around endorsing this business plan because I think we could be doing much better. So I don't know how you can accommodate that circumstance, Mr. Chair, but this agenda item places, I'd suggest, a number of councillors in a dilemma where we support the intent of cycling and the direction of cycling, but an issue around the funding and the way it is proposed to be done, which based on present experience is not delivering. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I will now take the call of Councillor Sayers.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I can't or I won't be supporting the intent of this paper, and I won't be endorsing its direction setting by the recommendations that we have there up on the screen. I'm a bit like my colleague, Councillor Walker. I don't believe that the cycleways are well used. This prioritisation strategy is, I think, mistakenly creating a perfect storm in terms of removing on-street parking, and this in an environment of intensified housing, which have the allowance for those new houses to not have any off-street parking. So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to take this opportunity to reflect on that $306 million decision in the RLTP, and the comment probably is for the ears of the Auckland Transport Board of Directors. It's also a chance to comment on voting in support of recommendation C1 and the appetite for $2 billion of funding. The way that I've heard and interpreted this paper is it's recommending to forcibly remove hundreds of car parks and numerous car lanes across Auckland and replacing them with cycle lanes. And how do we all know this? It's all summed up in clause 26, which I quote, effective delivery of this program relies on the parking strategy to support the removal of roadside space, the potential removal of some flush mediums, and in some cases, general traffic lanes. Surely isn't today about an opportunity to question if the money would be far better directed into other areas of the RLTP, and my messaging around there is probably the maintenance and safety areas. And I'm going to take this opportunity to do just that. I'm a bit sick and tired of meeting and reading and seeing photos of old ladies tripping over broken footpaths, injuring themselves, breaking their bones, skinning their knees and their skin and receiving black eyes. So in terms of priorities, I'd rather see money directed into better maintenance. And I also am tired of seeing people breathing in microscopic particles into their lungs, particles, Mr. Chair, that the World Health Organization have classified as potentially carcinogenic because they're so small, from the dust off unsealed roads. In my door-knocking experience over the last few weeks, Aucklanders are angry. They're angry that core maintenance services aren't being delivered by Auckland Transport, and that should be the forefront of future spending. We're being told that cycling has health benefits, but what about the health benefits of everybody else? Probably the last point, Mr. Chair, is given the budget constraints the Council currently faces, we should be maintaining what we already have, not building more cycleways that are not well used. You know, that ideology that if you build it, they will come, has proven itself to be a failed philosophy. In summary, Council spending needs to stay in step with the funds available. So my question even though I understand this is an improved budget, and this is papers presenting its priorities, I believe it's a budget that needs reviewing by the Auckland Transport Board of Directors, especially with the latest knowledge that the council's budget is stretched to or heading towards $1 billion. So I'll be voting against this priority setting paper, but I am asking. What I am asking for is for Auckland Transport to consider if this spending is still appropriate at the next board meeting, and I'd welcome any comment on that back from them. So that's my comment, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sayers. I will now go to the comment of Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support cycling investment, and I'd like to think that everybody around the table did, and particularly increasing the ability for our young ones to get to school safely, and as well as recreational cycling. But I do believe that in the current financial environment, it is premature to support any recommendation that notes a signal that council will need to fund an extra $2 billion, which by the way is a full year's rates take, for the cycling mobility program business case, without having worked through the transport emissions reduction plan, the potential impacts of the climate targeted rate if it is indeed successful, 80s parking plan, not to mention the NPSUD rezoning, because that may in itself reduce the cost to council as developers may be required to fund infrastructure. And then all the other work around bus and school safety. So I say this in the context of council's financial position, as we have yet to finish working through even our annual budget. And to do this 5 months shy of an election, I think is just not the right time. I believe this is for a new mayor, because we're going to get one, and a new council, and a new RLTP. So I am getting a little bit frustrated at the 10-year vision that this council is trying to implement at this stage, when we're not in a 10-year cycle. So I'm struggling to support this. I'm sorry, and in some respects, I'm sorry you've changed the resolutions, because I could have voted for at least some of the last lot, but I'm sorry, I just can't do this at this time. There's a lot of information I don't have to support it, and I'm very worried about the financial implications. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I will now go to Councillor Newman.
Yeah, Chair, there's a number of those projects at $306 million, which are quite good. I don't care what others think about whether it's a red herring or not. It was me who wrote to officers on Tuesday requesting a copy of the business case. And it was me who received a call from Auckland Transport yesterday afternoon telling me that it was a technical document and it wasn't something that I was going to have provided to me. And it was a nice surprise that an email came through last night. And nobody should second guess my interest in information. I just like to have that information so that I can make my own informed judgment. I don't need anybody to speak for my motive or to try and interpret my views. I can give my views. Thank you, Chair. The issue is that when you start to read the assumptions contained in the business case, I just don't support many of those assumptions, because I mean, one of the things that was excluded from the scope of this was stormwater upgrades. Why? Because the focus is on road space reallocation, and therefore that is the premise by which we are looking at this program moving forward. There are some projects that are conceived for my ward that I will not support, and I'm more than happy to be held to account for that view of the matter. I am listening carefully to voters as I am door knocking in the streets and the communities around my ward every week, and I'm very comfortable with the conversation that is taking place. Chair, I think that the fundamental problem that we have here is not that we are going to get to a situation whereby if we don't endorse this, these projects are going to become the orphans. Wayne Donnelly is right. There will be some orphans. There are orphans emerging already. Go and read the Road Controlling Authority Committee report for the end of March. The red ink is all over the balance sheet. And what we will see is an increasing reprioritisation based on criteria, decarbonisation and mode shift. And I'll be going to the Board of Auckland Transport this month about the effects of that in relation to some of the sites in my ward. There is clearly a need for a better balance. I get the need for reducing the amount of carbon emissions, but frankly, I ask the question in relation to the table contained in the body of the business case around the forecast reduction in emissions, because I happen to think that a reduction of 30,000 tonnes of CO2 for $2 billion, I question whether that actually is worth $2 billion. I don't think that that's much at all. I think that that is literally farting against thunder, I'm sorry to say. I happen to think that there is a real need to focus on a balanced approach whereby we meet the needs of, yes, cyclists and pedestrians, which is why I support shared paths for cyclists and pedestrians, rather than necessarily the opening the Pandora's box of further reallocation of the existing road corridor. I want to see the existing lanes in the road corridor being used as incentives for people to carpool. I don't want to see road corridor paid for by motorists who are sitting in traffic and they are tired. Those motorists who have paid for that only to see that piece of real estate reallocated for a cycleway, for which I don't think the demand is there. Chair, here's another thing that I think that we are going to have to get ourselves on top of, and that is the details of the changing landscape of decision making, not just in relation to Auckland Council, because I have no doubt that there will be some changes forthcoming. The reality is that if you look at the objective evidence, we will have a government policy statement on land transport written and published by the Minister of Transport the next month or two. But I think that there's probably a 50-50 chance that in 16 months there'll be a brand new government, a new minister, and a very different set of criteria to inform the government policy statement on land transport. And my view is that if we are not prepared to consider a more balanced approach to this, then a balanced approach will be served up by a government which has a very different set of priorities to the current one. I don't think that the current government is going to be able to support the rollout of the funding to match the kind of aspirational spend up that is being proposed in this particular business case beyond the $306 million, because the money isn't there and the time for implementation will run out. So, Chair, I am disappointed because I can't vote to endorse the business case either. But thank you very much to the officers for their intent. But I don't support an approach whereby I sign up to the principles by which they become the basis for a complete reallocation of the funding away from projects that are necessary. Well, someone can give me another 30 seconds.
If we could wrap up,
a reallocation.
Please, yes.
I'll move an increase of time.
No, look, if you could just wrap up, please, Councillor.
By way of which we reallocate existing money away from projects that need to be delivered for safety and amenity and to move freight, in favour of projects to reallocate precious road corridors for cycle benefits for which are not justified because of low patronage. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I will now get our Mayor Phil Goff.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thank you to officials for all of the work that you've put into this, and I intend to support the recommendations, and I think the recommendations have been clarified and improved by the amendments that have been made to them. Look, I'm glad we got the business case for those that want to dig into the detail. But frankly, without the business case, Mr. Chair, you've been very generous to us for this planning committee. We only had 212 pages to read, which I had to try to fit into when I got home from work last night at 8:30 and 10 o'clock this morning. It's good to have it there, but you don't have to have it there if you rely on the integrity of your officers to summarise it for you. That's what their job is. And if you want to go back and read it, that's great. But you don't have to rely on it to make a vote on this paper today. Secondly, just while I'm responding to what's been said earlier, Councillor Simpson and I both have a very close eye on spending because it's bloody difficult and there isn't enough money to go around. But I do note that actually we're not approving another 1.7 billion. We're noting that that's what it would take to achieve these particular objectives. So it's a noting item, so that's not a reason for me not to support this. I don't know where the 1.7 billion is going to come from, but I do know that we've got 306 million, and I do know that God and my colleagues willing, we'll have another 130 million from the targeted rate for climate action. Third point, just in response to what others have said, Councillor Newman ended up talking about safety. One of the reasons why I'm supporting this paper, it sets out goals, and I approve of the goals, and it sets out prioritisation of how you get the best bang for the buck, and I approve of that. And the first goal I approve of, Councillor Newman, is that one of safety. When 70% of our deaths and serious injuries are caused not to people in cars, but by people in cars to pedestrians, cyclists, and I'll put my hand up as a motorcyclist because that comes into that category as well. I know we've got to do better. And if we're talking about money, as I was a moment ago, there are not only the human pain and suffering and the loss of the families and the debility to those that are injured by motor vehicle accidents, but it does cost our economy hundreds of millions of dollars. So you've got to put safety at the top, and that's one of the top goals that we've seen from this strategy. Secondly, emissions reductions. I don't know, there's no point in sitting around this table and voting for we're going to cut transport emissions by 64% and then working out that you need about a 7%, an increase to 7% of all journeys by cycling and then not do anything about it. You can't just say, we'll do this and never give them the wherewithal to achieve what we're trying to achieve. So emissions reduction, it's critical that we get more people for whom it's suitable to travel by cycle. Next thing was travel for children. I did the work on this and found out that if parents didn't run their kids to school, that would cut our peak hour congestion in the morning by 15 to 20%. 15 to 20%. Then I thought back, it was only a couple of years ago when I was a kid going to school. I can't remember anybody being dropped off at school by their mum and dad. And I remember at secondary school we had a thing called bike sheds. They were famous for a whole variety of reasons. But you had bike sheds because so many of the kids rode to school by their bikes, as I did. Actually, I rode all the way from Alfriston to Papatoetoe High School. But today, I checked out the figures for the number of kids go to secondary school who take their bikes. You know what it is? 3%. 3%, when it probably used to be 50, 60%. And we've got to do better than that. And this is back to the future, and it makes a whole lot of sense. Healthier people, access to public transport, they speak for themselves. Prioritisation strategy, if I just touch on that briefly. First thing, connected network. Yeah, look, there's a few people expressed, and I understand why there's cynicism about if you build it, will people come to it? If you build it properly, they will. But that requires joined up networks. Because if you're worried about safety, you're not going to say, hey, the first 2 kilometres I can travel safely by cycleway, and then I've got to navigate between crowded roads full with cars for the next 2. So connected networks, that's an important priority too. that routes that maximise the number of users. Well, that's so common sense I don't need to speak to it. 3, it's faster and cheaper if we can use existing road space. And we're talking about money here, and a couple of councillors talked about it was $2 to $4 million per kilometre. Well, actually, if you decide to reallocate some of your road space in a sensible way, where it makes sense to, it doesn't make sense everywhere, but where it makes sense, that's obviously the right thing to do. And I've already talked about the 4th priority of reducing deaths and serious injuries. Look, the challenge is we've got this 306 million plus maybe another 130 million to spend. We haven't got the 1.7 billion at this point, but we should have a strategy to ramp up when that money becomes available, either by advocating to central government or for some other reason. I will finish on just a small note of criticism. Teacher parking. Don't know who thought that idea up, but 1, we don't have jurisdiction over it. 2, why would we single out one particular profession and say we're going to take away your parking? And 3, why would you give a headline to a story that didn't set out what the context of this paper was by putting a silly idea like that in it? So I'm glad, Mr Chairman, you've taken that out. The final point I want to make is, BCR ratios. The BCR, people who say, look, we're wasting your money here. The BCR ratios of 2 to 3% or even a bit higher than that are much better than a whole lot of other things that we're doing. So, Mr Chairman, I endorse this report and I thank those that have contributed to it.
Thank you, Mayor Phil. Now go to the call of Councillor Collins, please.
Oh, kia ora, Chair, and thank you everyone for the discussion and the questions that have been asked earlier. Look, I'll begin by saying that I'll be supporting the recommendations. I firstly wanted to congratulate Councillor Dalton. I thought your interview on ZB a couple of days ago, actually yesterday, Councillor Dalton was very, very good, and I thought you handled the questions really well, and in that short, I think it was a 3-4 minute interview, I thought you gave some really clear and concise answers, and you speaking earlier in this debate outlined even further just how sure you are of this proposal, and you even spoke in the interview of some of the challenges of it too. And so I thank you for the very balanced view that you've taken here, Councillor. Sir, I just wanted, for me, this is an issue of safety, and I know there have been councillors who've commented this afternoon on getting around through the electorate. I know a lot of people are door knocking at the moment, and I can assure you that I've been doing quite a bit myself. I've got a slightly bigger challenge this time round. Last night I spoke at a Rotary Club and had quite a long conversation with some people who've been challenged by the idea of cycleways and their desire to be able to move a lot more freely in their cars. After the conversation was slightly prolonged, but we had the opportunity to talk. And once those challenges were raised and we started to have a wider conversation, I think the tone of the conversation went from being slightly angry and frustrated to being a little bit more understanding and empathic. And that's where I think we need to get. And there's a part of me that wonders why we often end up, there may be some elements to the way in which ideas have been presented around teacher parking, all that kind of stuff that pushes us to the extreme ends of an understanding, which is where we start our conversation. But it's important we try our best, similar to what happened last night in the conversation that I had at West Haven Marina, around how we meet and understand where everyone is coming from. So I wanted to say that the reason why I'll be supporting this particular recommendation is the focus on young people. Councillor Philippine has already talked about the infrastructure, the cycleway infrastructure in parts of Mangere, and we've seen that grow and develop in its use and uptake of those people in the community who are using it at the moment. Sure, there have been periods where it's been dry, but I think the challenge that's that we have there is an educational challenge, is the often reliance of people from more vulnerable, poorer communities to be so car dependent that it does take a while to get onto your bikes. But I'd love to see more of our young people on their bicycles or e-scooters getting to school safely. And so for me, this is an issue of safety. I was thinking back to comments I made about a year ago when I met families during the COVID lockdown period. I met families who were coming up to me saying, look, we've got the kids on their bikes. We're happy because no one's using the roads anymore. And we as a family feel safe for our kids to be able to cycle, to be able to scooter. And that's where we want to be. Well, I'm not saying we're going to close down all the roads. What I am saying is that it's important that people in these communities feel a sense of safety. And this is the priority. We've called this a priority setting document. Well, the priority is our safety. The priority is the health outcomes that come as part of the package when we've got more people in active modes of transport. The safest way for many of our kids to get to school at the moment here is the walking bus, because we know we've got adults, we know they're going to be together, but wouldn't it be wonderful if they were able to cycle to school and to be safe? And so that's why I think it's so important that this is the priority we set. We don't have all of this money, the $2 billion that's being bandied around. Yeah, we know that's going to be something we're going to have to work through, and that's not something we have immediately in front of us. But the priority is to set these kinds of active transport modes as a way in which the future of the city is going to look towards. So I understand that we often start this conversation at extreme ends, but we can come closer together. We can collapse the distance between those discussions if we just take a moment to breathe and think carefully about how this is going to benefit our young people in particular. And this is about choice. This is going to see, we've been told, 40% reduction in those serious accidents over the next, expected in the next 8 or 9 years. That's fantastic. There've been way too many deaths, way too many accidents for cyclists on our streets because it's just not safe, and we need safe infrastructure so that we can have people cycle safely and be healthy. So I'll be supporting this today, and I commend it, and I thank you that it's been brought to the table, and I commend those who've been able to participate in the discussions leading up to this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. I will now take the comment of Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very pleased to follow Councillor Collins because, like him, I want to see a future. As the person who launched the walking bus, I was delighted to hear him speak in favour of it. And at one level, there is such an important element here about our young people and ensuring that they can attend school without their parents dropping them off. But can I put that aside for one moment and just take that in as an assumption that I think everybody in this room or wherever they are on their virtual rooms support that. I don't think it's a case of goodies and baddies and villains and heroes on this. I think everybody wants that. What I'm angry about today is this has been a schmozzle, the way it's been put forward. I'd actually like to support it. But on the 31st of March, an important issue like that was put together along with the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, along with the car parking strategy. I can't even remember, somebody needs to remind me, we never got even halfway through that agenda. So we had a whole month that more information could have been put forward. I'm in the situation today where I'm appalled that councillors are being attacked for asking for more information, for asking to have business cases. I think the public assume, wrongly it seems, that we are not going to interrogate issues to make sure of the accountability and the financial viability. These are things that no councillor should ever have to apologise for asking for. So I'd like that to be treated somewhat more respectfully. And I'd like ways and processes whereby we can bring people together. There are lots of merits behind what is being proposed today. And you, more than anyone else, Mr. Chair, will know that going back a number of years when David Warburton was the CEO of Auckland Transport, I think at that stage I was the chair of parks, and we were constantly having local boards coming to us with requests for financial support for buying snippets of land across local board. And we realised in Auckland Transport that we needed to bring the Pathways project together. And you were part of that. So you know what the genesis of that has been. And what that was about was trying to bring everybody together. Now, currently, we're operating in an environment of extreme distrust. If I just look at my own ward, the people of Mount Albert wouldn't trust anybody, or very few people would trust anybody after the fiasco that the Mount Albert upgrade was, and that's going to have to be revisited. But to say that, you know, this is just a small technical matter and you know, it's in the RLTP already. Councillor Simpson's quite right to say this is not business as usual. We are in extremely unusual circumstances, and I think it's right and proper and will give a lot more confidence to those who are sceptical about investments in cycleways that we are giving due diligence to these issues and that it's being done thoroughly and comprehensively. I want to see more investments in cycleways, but I also want to see better process on council. I think the 31st of March should have been a lesson to us that these issues need to be given the amount of time and prioritisation in terms of debate that they justify. Lord only knows how many other issues that we can spend hours and hours of time on, but on these ones, it doesn't take much to realise that a planning committee meeting isn't going to be able to deal with 800 or 900 pages, as was the 31st of March. I can't even remember. It might have even been 1,000 pages of controversial matters. So I'm a bit annoyed today. I want to see the public coming together on these things. It's almost like there are some of us who don't want everyone to unite on these issues, that they just want to own the issue and somehow by way of virtue signalling they're going to be superior in some way than somebody else. I don't believe that. I think cycleways have been around for the last 20, 30 years. And like you, Mr. Chair, I cycled to school and I enjoyed cycling to school, and I want everybody to have that same opportunity. But we are not doing justice to this issue. I want to support it. I think Wayne Donnelly is one of the best directors we could possibly have, but he's been let down by our governance processes on the 31st of March and again today. And as such, I'm really struggling to think how I can support this because it's a schmozzle.
Thank you, Councillor. As Chair, I just need to address the question of attack. I have had nobody's raised with me any personal attack, and I'm not aware of any personalised response to any councillor. So just as your chair, I want to clarify that. I'll go to the next speaker, Councillor Coombe.
Thank you, Chair, and I welcome the opportunity to speak in support. And in doing that, I'm just reflecting on, I've been reading through the feedback on our annual budget, and we all know the headline for that 68% have said they support the climate action targeted rate, and that's pretty consistent across Auckland, across ethnicities, across age groups, across local board areas, that there's really strong support for the climate action targeted rate. And in reading the comments, it's from all kinds of Aucklanders saying that they want to see action on climate, and in particular to be able to get around Auckland safely, walking, cycling, micromobility, or on a bike. At the same time, Coincidentally, yesterday research was released saying that Auckland is one of the most unsafe places for pedestrians and cyclists compared to cities around the world. And we've got increasing deaths of vulnerable road users. And we know the way to address this is by providing safe, connected infrastructure. And this is for this benefits everybody. We've heard some headlines around that over 50% of Aucklanders would ride if they felt safe. Over 50% of Aucklanders own a bike. And I think it's always important in those conversations that this isn't, that it encompasses micromobility in all of its forms as well. And that includes people who get around using wheels, buggies, using micro-mobility, using scooters, mobility scooters, because they're all benefiting the more that we build a safe, connected network. So I would really love today that we were actually talking about that and talking about signing off on that network, and that politically we were showing our aspiration that we have in Te Taruki a Tawhiri to make mode share 7%, and that we really were aiming for that goal of delivering a network. Unfortunately, it has dropped away. It was the old Auckland Regional Council had a goal of delivering the network by 2026. It was in the original Auckland plan that we deliver it by 2030, I think. So here we are doing something very controversial, is that in a climate emergency, we're not actually talking about delivering a network, and we're not actually talking about the investment that we need to deliver it. And I do think in many ways, there's been a few headlines about outrage. The outrage really should be that all we're talking about today is what happens with the $306 million that's already in the RLTP, that's already been voted on, that's already in there. And it is, as we've heard in the questions, this is actually in the, I think it's in year 3, 4 that investment even happens. So all we're being asked today is around how that should be prioritised. And I would love to be hearing more feedback from members of the committee just around that prioritisation. We did go through a political reference group. It is there on the as a summary on the presentation. It's investment that's all outside of my ward, so I really listen to the local board members as well who are on that reference group about their feedback and the aspirations of their communities to invest. So I haven't heard a lot of pushback that we didn't get it right in terms of that prioritisation. So, I mean, it is a start, but what we know is it's really not enough, and we need to lift our game. But taking the fact that we have got this $306 million,
Your Councillor Kern, your connection is breaking.
Sorry, breaking up.
Just carry on now.
Going?
Yes, you're clearer now.
Okay, I wasn't having a coughing fit, so hopefully I can keep going. So I was just talking about this $306 million and how we've got to get as much bang for buck as we possibly can. And I'm sure Councillor Newman is aware that it's not actually motorists that pay for the roads, it's actually all of us, ratepayers, taxpayers, and everybody. Even if you're riding a bike, you're paying for the roads. So we've got to ensure that every renewal, every upgrade we take advantage of to deliver as much as we can of the strategic network, because we've got to get better value than $5 million per kilometre. So I'm pleased to hear that Auckland Transport are doing more there, but I think We've got to raise the ambition and really, really push with what we can do with renewals when we upgrade. I was pleased to hear some councillors talk about that we should take some inspiration from Tokyo. Well, in Tokyo, the reason why they don't have a lot of separated infrastructure is because they don't have any private storage of car parking on road, and they have 30k speed limits in all of their residential areas. So great to hear that councillors would support that. Also, just in terms of the evidence, I heard sort of some back to front views on that in terms of what the evidence shows, and I'd love to hear anything that's contrary to this. But if you look at the Northwestern Cycleway, that has increased patronage over 10 years as it's become more and more connected. It has over 400% increase in patronage as it has developed. So all of the research does show that if you build a connected infrastructure, and I will just wrap up now, if I may, Chair, because I do just want to end with some final comments in terms of being part of the political reference group, and I do acknowledge everybody who was on that, and I particularly just want to acknowledge Angela. She made a great introduction to this, moving this motion, really highlighted the benefits, and there are just so many benefits for all of Auckland, so thank you, Angela. And what I really admire about you too is that you look at the evidence. You're someone that comes to everything really in a really considered way. So if members don't feel that they want to listen to me, then I hope that they've taken on board Angela's comments, because she really works through the evidence, really got into the detail around where the prioritisation should be, and worked through that. So it was a really pleasure to be part of that reference group with her, and I do thank you, Angela. And it was great to hear that as a result of that process, you were even looking at buying a bike, which is great, because it's so important that everybody in Auckland has the option to get on a bike, because it's so that we can all work towards our shared goals that we all signed off previously. So thank you, Chair. That's why I'm going to be supporting this motion today, and I do thanks for the work that's gone into tweaking the recommendations so that they're really clear about what we're actually trying to achieve today and the benefits of doing so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coombe. Next call is with Independent Māori Statutory Board Member Karen Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hope I don't get a bell dinging me, so I'll keep it short and sharp. In order to support priorities, one must first ensure that you have effective input and participation into this or any other paper. There has been an ongoing absence of effective Māori input and participation in this paper that comes before us. Why is that? It seems to me the greater good of the whole tends to subjugate the views of the minority. 24% of all Māori in the 2013 figures reside in Tāmaki Makaurau. They live, work and play here in Tāmaki Makaurau. I recall previous Mayor Brown referencing Māori as the point of difference in Tāmaki Makaurau. That was the catchphrase. That was media messaging, and subsequent strategy was put around this. We seem to inch towards more the principles for Te Treaty and the obligations, but it's not being currently reflected in this paper or many of the other papers that come before us. Moreover, commentary around whether or not this may be operational kōrero or we don't really need to in terms of the business case is also very unhelpful, we believe. Let me have a different script. If I was to ask for something, let me have a different script as a member of the IMSB that is not repetitive, which it is mostly in terms of what I talk to, and doesn't require us to even have membership here. I'm here to say, I guess, Mr. Chair, that reflected in here is not the voice of mana whenua or Māori or iwi, and therefore we will be voting accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Wilson. And now Councillor Mulholland.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to comment. I want to firstly acknowledge all of the staff that have done a lot of work on this, and it's very clear that staff have put a lot of effort into this. So that's incredibly important that we acknowledge everyone that has contributed and the elected members that also participated. So I think $306 million, whilst approved in principle, you know, what will it really deliver? And, you know, what will those practical benefits be? And where is the cost for the business as usual maintenance? You know, when I do think we are struggling to pay currently and will struggle as we move forward to pay for some maintenance on projects. So that's a little concerning for me, and I think concerning for the public from what I've been reading. I have been reading a lot online, and I do believe that, yes, the teachers comment, and if I have a little bit of a concern to add, it's why was it even raised? But anyway, it has been, and that's the point, it's been dealt with. But I am concerned about budgets, and that has been raised by Councillor Simpson, and I want to acknowledge Councillor Simpson for sharing her concerns around the financial implications. And I say long term, the Mayor also raised the fact that $1.7 billion hadn't been approved, but he was hopeful, and I think everyone's hopeful, that we would get substantial funding from government in the future. But I can't really see that, given, you know, the types of projects and things that we do need to achieve, when I can't even get money for a pool for my community. But anyway, that aside, I do support cycling, and I do support, and in fact, I support people using scooters. I bought one myself, but I got rid of it because I tell you, it was so dangerous. There's no way on earth I was going to continue on with that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be in these fabulous meetings sharing my views on behalf of constituents, and I know they need me to be here. You know, we talk about the whole of Tamaki, and I just want to raise some things that have been brought to mind lately, and I think, Chair, you'll be familiar with these when I say them. So we talk about Tamaki Makaurau and this amazing city, but it is a huge and diverse city. It is significantly huge in terms of geography. So I just want to raise my concerns around where funding goes and how we say we're going to allocate and support all of our community when we're not even sealing some roads, and there's not even pathways for children. It doesn't actually have to even be children, it can be our elderly, and I think of the people in the Faux area. They don't have those services, so you know, I sort of think we've got to also be mindful of where is the money going that we desperately need, so that people can be safer. So I just raised that too, and I don't believe that had been raised before. One of the things I've had to deal with in my time as an elected member, and as we all know, it hasn't been as long as everyone else that is sitting around the table or online, and thank you for all staying with it. I've had to talk with parents who fight just locally and have fought with their words and hands, as in not hitting, but making little signs with their fingers maybe to each other up at one of my local schools, because they're all arguing over trying to drop children off. And so, yes, I acknowledge absolutely that we have an issue and we have to fix that. But I think other things could be done by the skilled staff to come up with ideas to fix those types of problems. And the walking bus, someone raised it. I'm not sure who that was, sorry. But anyway, I just want to end, Chair. And I do want to say that I'm grateful, Councillor Darby, that, and as Chair, you have an open mind in listening to us as councillors, because the comment has already been raised that sometimes I feel a little bit lectured to by councillors, and that's just a view. But I appreciate that you are listening to different views, and mine is that I just question the lateness of information coming to us. We all are very busy, and I know people work very, very hard, so I just question the logic of that. And there's been a little bit of controversy around that and differing views back and forth, and I've heard both of those as well, and I've listened right through. So just that does concern me a little bit. How can we be the best we can if all the information that councillors require isn't with them within sufficient time. And so that's just a comment. It's not a criticism, but it's just a comment and an observation that I see, because I haven't read it all. I have a lot of work on, a lot of things to do. So, yeah, thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Mulholland. We'll now take the speaking turn of Councillor Stewart.
Thank you. I have to agree with a number of the councillors, especially Councillor Greg Sayers, Councillor Simpson, Daniel Newman, Christine Fletcher, and just after listening to Councillor Mulholland, I have to agree with some of the points that Councillor Mulholland came up with. Especially, she was talking about how she had a scooter and she's not going to use the scooter anymore because she found it too dangerous. Our footpaths are really dangerous, so that's where some of the money could be spent. During the winter months, we have a lot of cyclists that don't cycle. You see, I see a lot of cycleways, especially out Pepitoi, Mangere, different places like that, where you never see, or very rarely ever see, a cyclist cycling, and they've actually taken away valuable lanes, you know, for people that need to use cars to get to work. As far as parents dropping off their children, and some of them have to drop off preschool, and then they drop off primary, and then they go off to work. So sometimes people do need to use cars. We do have some extreme weather in Auckland. We have a lot of wind, we have a lot of rain, and the geography is not the same as in the Netherlands and some of the places that you've been talking about, and even Christchurch. So I think the money could be far better used. We're talking about climate change, so the regional land transport plan, some of the climate change, it would be far better to be using it for flooding and stormwater and those sort of things. But I think the cycleways, as Councillor Greg said earlier, people, we've built them, and there's a lot of people that aren't using them. There might be some areas that they use them, and I think over the shore, yes, I hear that people use them over the shore. Te Atatu into the city, yes, they use them. But for most people, and you know, and I'm not against cyclists or anything like that, but a lot of cyclists, they only really use them for recreational. They don't actually use them to go to work. So anyway, I've had my say, but I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Hills, please.
Thank you, Chair. And just, yeah, on a few points at the beginning, I did call you a couple of days ago about that secretarial note about the teacher parking or the staff parking at schools, and thank you for agreeing, and Councillor Dalton for agreeing to be clear that that is nothing to do with us and to take that out, and it wasn't part of our overall strategy, because that has distracted from the overall. The other thing, I think probably the sad thing is that we've missed is that we've consulted on the RLTP, and there was strong support for far more cycling and far more climate action and far more travel choices and safety. AT didn't need to come back to us on this business case, and that was clear at the workshop a couple of weeks ago, where we went through the business case with Auckland Transport. They came to this because they wanted our further direction, and due to the CCO review, to get more input from our committee. They actually didn't need to come back to us on this at all, and they don't normally bring business cases on any project to the detail, unless, you know, I know you and I have asked the Lake Road business case and things like that, but largely this was AT trying to give us more information because the budgets are already approved, and they were approved by all of us, and what we're approving today is direction on the funding of cycling, essentially, and that, as Jenny Checkman said, is less than 1% of the overall budget. So We're spending less than every major city in New Zealand still on cycling per capita, and we're spending far less than most of the major cities that we're comparable to around the world. So I guess it's disappointing that the kind of shock and horror makes it sound like we're doing something sort of overwhelming in the space. We're still spending less than every other city in the country and most of the world. And on Tokyo, yeah, those comments, they banned all on-street car parking in the 60s, and you have to pay significant funds to own a vehicle, and you have to prove that you can. So we're not doing anything like that in Auckland, and that's, you know, so it's hard. You can't compare apples to apples on that. The other thing, this you know, is huge for climate change. I think of this week, what have we had? We've had the report on sea level rise, pretty depressing, says that we're going to be significantly underwater in 10 to 15 years as opposed to 50 to 60 years, which we thought we were going to be. And we also had, as many others have said, 68% support for our climate action targeted rate. We thought the low 60s was pretty exciting to see support for the water quality and natural environment targeted rate. I don't think we ever expected 68% for the climate action target rate, which is phenomenal. The comments here around the cycling mode, the 7%, we all unanimously voted and told AT that we wanted them, and it was clear it was one of the resolutions in Te Tārakia Tāwhiri Auckland's climate plan that we supported. We went through it. I don't know how many workshops we went through that we've all supported on that. We all unanimously supported halving our emissions by 2030 as well. We are making this impossible if we don't support the direction after telling AT we want them to do that. The other thing around safety, it's pretty, I don't know, I'm sure all of us feel that way, but the last few months and, you know, every couple of months, the person that lands on the front page, their image and quotes from their family about them being killed on our roads, on roads that we are responsible for, is pretty jarring. And I don't know how many times I see those images burnt into my mind of what could we have done and what could AT have done to stop or prevent those deaths. One of the top 10 leading causes of serious deaths and injuries in kids under 14 is cycling on our roads. I think it is, I'm pretty embarrassed when kids say to me that our roads are unsafe, what are you doing about it? And most of the time, I can't point to anything that we are doing. When I was a kid, 24% of young people cycled to school and traffic was better. Now, as many have said, it's about 2 to 3%. We could change everything if we make our streets safer for kids. A leading cause of injury and death in people over 65, because cycling is very popular in young people and very popular in old people, is being hit as a pedestrian or a cyclist on our roads, because we are responsible. And, you know, sooner or later, under the Health and Safety Act, I can imagine, as you know, we're already being taken to court on emissions. I can imagine being taken to court on our dereliction of duty to make our streets safe for every user. So I'm pretty worried we make this sound like we're doing something. This is less than 1% of our total transport budget. We're doing a lot in all areas, and this is so important to our climate responsibility that we keep telling people we're doing, and then we turn our backs on it. So this is not controversial. This is just what we've already asked AT to do. And right now, any more funding will come back to us in the next RLTP, come back to the next council, and every project will also be consulted on with the local boards, with the business associations, and with those communities, including schools that are begging us to do this. That is the process. So this is not controversial. Thank you, Chair. Of course, I'll be supporting it because we've all already supported it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hills. I'll now go to Councillor Young. Councillor Young.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Appreciate all the speaker touching thoughts, and I have the same concern with Councillor Simpson mentioned earlier on our tough financial situation. In addition, I'm not a cyclist, but I still can remember how to ride a bike in my childhood. However, I do seriously concern the safety issue, the 40% reduction in the deaths. It's an important number in the next 10 years, as well as the responsibility on the climate issues. So I support it. Kia ora, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Bartley, your call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the councillors, the local board members on this working party for this. Thank you to the staff for all their work. I wanted to speak in support of this. I don't see this as something specific to cyclists. I see this as something for all Aucklanders. If I can just say, Ellerslie, Royal Oak, Panmure, 3 areas in my ward where we have had people on their bikes killed. And that's on my watch as the councillor for Maungakeki Tamaki. So I feel some responsibility, and I know when councillors hear of a death in their community of someone who rode their bike to work or to school, you know, they feel it as well. We all feel it. And I just think we have a responsibility to do something. People say it's not safe to ride your bike. I did that bike ride in Mangere with the mayor, with Mr. T and his group. We were okay when there was a cycle lane for us to go in, a cycleway for us to go in. But then once we got into Papatoi, Monaco, and there wasn't one, it felt unsafe. So yes, you can say it's not safe, but then it's our responsibility to make it safe. And it's within our power to do so. So yes, this is a start. It is a start, but that doesn't mean that we finish it. We have to do a lot more, because there are areas where we're not even mentioning putting in connections there for these cycle lanes. When I was, because everyone's talking about when they were at school and they were younger and they used to ride a bike to school. When I was younger, we got dropped off every day from Mangere to Otahu, where we went to school. My dad dropped us off every day. We did not ride a bike. That, you know, was Auckland back then. That is not the Auckland that we have today with all this congestion, and the Auckland that we're going to have tomorrow. So we do need to put things in place now to cater for the fact that, you know, it's a different Auckland, and it's going to be a different Auckland. And I'm very clear about my role here. It's not about the here and now, it's about the future. I look at my 7-year-old niece who takes her scooter to school in Howick, and my 9-year-old nephew who rides the bike to school in Howick. And, you know, the decisions I make now are for them. And I want them to be safe when they go to school on their micro mobility things that they use. So I'm very clear about where I stand in this, and I hope others do too. I hear what everyone's saying, their concerns about information, not being engaged properly, but I look at the benefits of this and who's going to benefit. So that's where I stand. Thank you very much, everybody. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Bartley. And now I'll take the call of Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I'll be short and sweet because it's very simple. We've declared a climate emergency. You know, we actually have a responsibility to future generations for this stuff. You know, some of the debate that I'm hearing today, it's akin to saying, look, I haven't seen anyone swimming over the harbour, so we shouldn't build a harbour bridge. Goodness me. It has been proved that they will come, and I'll come and take anyone to show you the proof on Northwestern Pathway that I actually used to commute into the city. There's a problem with congestion on that path. It's just so packed with cyclists, with e-scooters, children, young and old. It's absolutely fantastic. That's the kind of thing that we should be doing when we're looking at vision for an Auckland, that we can all sort of grow our kids in and really enjoy. So I'll be supporting it. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. And now Councillor Cooper.
Really sorry, I just had to provide another balanced view, Mr. Chair. You know, listening to this, we have already approved this. It has been consulted with everybody, and Māori as well, very clearly, with LGP, the RLTP. That's been done. And the notion that we haven't done that is just absurd. It's evidence-based, it's actually been done. We've got all the documents to show it. I'm hearing councillors saying, oh, I'm worried about the money, when only 4 hours ago they post on Facebook how excited they are about their shared pathway. And all the constituents that have commented have gone, yay, that's so fantastic. But they're now not worried about the money. Well, there's this whole, clickbait stuff by some elected members, local board members and councillors that I've just seen, and calling us all dinosaurs. I'm sorry, the dinosaurs are the ones that don't see a way forward. And even our older Aucklanders in the LTP were the ones that most fed back about wanting to, look at climate change and lower emissions for their children in the future. And no, I didn't call you dinosaurs. I'm saying on Facebook, we are being called dinosaurs for wanting to pass this. It wasn't, that's what I read that on Facebook on a post. And I'm saying dinosaurs would be people who don't look to the future. We're not dinosaurs by voting for this. And so my concern is that, people are saying things like, no one uses the cycleways. Well, I've literally counted on purpose, going along the Northwestern Motorway, the hour it takes me to get to town, more than 100 people just one way, 100 users. And that was a Sunday morning. And also, what's wrong with using these things for recreational things? Hey, we used to go for Sunday drives in our car. It used to be a recreation, and it even is now. Let's take a little recreational go up to Matakana. We use our cars for recreation. Why can't we use our cycles? It's just about sharing the space. And people talk about it's too unsafe to use a scooter or whatever. Well, that's what we're trying to do here, making it safe. And it is blimmin' unsafe. And I ride a lot around the Hobsonville corridor, down at Hobsonville Point. They're lucky. They had master planned cycleway. Good on them. But I want some too. I want some in my Waitakere community. I want more. We've been waiting for Lincoln Road forever. And so that's really important because, we've got to make it safer. And we're not voting for any more money here. That's the message out there, is we're voting for billions of dollars. We're not. And we're also in some of these posts, I cut your cloth. Well, we have. We've only put this much, 603 million, over 10 years in the long-term plan because that's all we can afford at the moment. We are cutting our cloth. We'd love to do more. And households do that too. We want this and we want this and this, but we can only do that at the moment. So that's what we do. This is exactly what households do. But we need to do it. And of course, I'm sure we'll be slapped around for it, but I'm not prepared to leave things the way they are and not give the opportunities that we had to cycle to school and walk safely to school to our children and grandchildren. Because we're really, even though we're trying to aim for less car dependency, and we're not all going to get out of our cars, obviously, but we've got to give options for people or they can't. So I'm going to support this. I'm not supporting the $1 billion because I'm supporting the 603 that's in front of us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. And now I will go to Independent Māori Statutory Board Member Tauhena Ray. Kia ora tau.
Kia ora, Chief. Thank you. Let me make it abundantly clear to all people who are on this call that Māori haven't been consulted fully. Mana whenua and mātāwaka haven't been consulted, as the previous councillor would suggest. That's why both myself and Member Wilson will be abstaining from the vote. It's not a case of whether we agree or not with the proposal. It's a case of Māori not being taken seriously. And we continue down that track. So I just want to make it clear that we're not opposed to what is in front of us. but we are opposed to not being consulted as a group of people that we should be. And this goes with everything. That's why we are here, both Member Wilson and I. So we, rather than say no or yes, we will take our position and abstain. Kia ora. Thank you.
Kia ora, Member Henare, and that concludes the commentary, but I do offer the right of reply to the mover, which is Councillor Dalton.
Very quickly, Chair, because so much has been said and it's been really good to listen to all of the commentary this afternoon. I wanted to thank the Board of Auckland Transport. They have honoured their commitment to the CCO review outcomes, and that is to create a better governance relationship together. And by bringing this paper to us today, which they of course did not have to do nor need to, they have. And more power to them, and I hope they haven't been put off, that they will continue to do that for us, because if we can get this still, just listening to everyone today, there's still there's some gaps in what people are voting for at sometimes, and then not when it really comes to get something across the line, for whatever reason that might be. So we've still got some work to do to ensure that we're all on board with the strategies that we're setting, the direction that we're giving to Auckland Transport. So thank you to the board, and in particular to Brian, who's been here today and listening to us. I guess I'll make the comment now. I was going to make it later, but this is the second important strategy that is going to be abstained by the IMSB, and that concerns me. So I would ask Auckland Transport to really look seriously at their engagement with Mana Whenua, Matawaka, and liaise with IMSB about that, because these are important strategies for the future of our city. And we must have input from Māori in that. I guess the thing I've been surprised about maybe the most is the talk around the money. The 306 million is in the Regional Land Transport Plan. We are endorsing the direction and the intent for that money that's already agreed to, already approved, already in the plan. We're getting a signal that to really deliver, to get where we need to go for the 7% is 2 billion. We have many strategies that are not funded when we agree to them. We have to have a strategy, or else we're rudderless in what we do. So I'm not quite sure about why the 2 billion at this point in time is a concern. I'm very clear on the finances of this council at the moment, and there is not $1.7 million to pull out of thin air. But at least we've got a signal of what's required. And the other thing to that, it means that Auckland Transport can go to Waka Kotahi and any other partners they need to go to with a figure that might be required to deliver on the ambitions of this document. Finally, if you build it, they will come. I have an example too, and that is the Southern Pathway. And it is funded by Waka Kotahi. But it is so full, and mostly families and children on their scooters and their bikes with their parents on their bikes, or they're walking. It's just good to see, you know, where were they going before? I don't know. And then to be able to hook that up at either end would be the icing on the cake. So there is an element of, if you build it, they will come. I totally support that. So I'll leave it there, because there's been a lot of conversation tonight, but in closing, again, thank you to the Auckland Transport Board.
Kia ora, Councillor. And now we'll go to the vote, and Councillor Walker has called a division on A. So I'll now hand to Kalinda Iswa.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a division on item 9, clause A. Councillor Darby.
4.
Councillor Bartley.
4.
Councillor Casey.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor.
Aye.
Councillor Collins.
Full.
Councillor Coombe.
Aye.
Councillor Cooper.
For.
Councillor Dalton.
For.
Councillor Filipina.
Aye.
Councillor Fletcher.
Abstain.
Mayor Phil.
Aye.
Member Henare.
Abstain.
Councillor Henderson.
For.
Councillor Hills.
Yes, thank you. Kia ora.
Councillor Mulholland.
Abstain.
Councillor Newman.
No.
Councillor Sayers.
Against.
Councillor Simpson.
Sorry, abstain.
Councillor Stewart.
No.
Councillor Walker.
Abstain.
Councillor Watson.
Abstain.
Member Wilson.
Abstain.
Councillor Young.
For.
Okay, that is carried. Let's scroll down, please. By 13 votes to 3 with 7 abstentions.
Thank you, members. That draws us to the conclusion of that part of our agenda. We're in dire need of a break, and we'll have that soon, but I need to move an extension of time to the conclusion of our business. I'll move accordingly. Do I have a second, please?
Second, and I have to leave at
Do that.
4:30.
Councillor Cooper will second. Thank you.
And we need to do the rest of the vote.
Oh, sorry. So we'll just do this. We'll move the extension of time right now. It's moved and seconded. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried.
Aye.
Sorry.
Aye.
And
Aye.
now I'll go back, and if I can take the B, C, D and E all together on the voices. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And to the contrary,
Aye.
and to the contrary say no.
Abstained.
Okay, thank you. Just before I conclude that vote, Councillor Mulholland, can I just record your abstention?
Abstention recorded, please.
I'll just go to Councillor Mulholland first. Councillor Mulholland, did I hear your abstention on the balance? And you'd like that recorded? Councillor Fletcher,
Yes,
I think
and
the
sorry,
same.
but thanks.
Are there any other abstentions for the balance of the motions that have been voted on?
Sharon.
Yes, kia ora.
Sorry,
Kia ora,
we don't
Chair,
know who
myself
belongs
and-
to the voice. If you could, Member Henare, you're an abstention on the balance as well?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and Member Wilson.
Thank you. Recorded accordingly. Are there any other members of the committee?
Councillor Sayers as well.
Councillor Sayers,
Councillor Sayers.
recorded. Councillor Sayers, thank you.
Simpson.
Okay. Are there any other?
You need to hold me up, Wayne.
Yeah, Watson's abstaining and so is Walker.
Thank you for representing Councillor Watson,
abstain.
Councillor Walker, and we've got those two
Abstain.
councillors as well. Okay, we're closing it off there, and we're recording that.
Chair,
Concludes
I
our,
heard Councillor Simpson.
Councillor Simpson. Can you tell us whether you wish to record an abstention on the balance of the motions?
Yes, I've got it written down there.
Okay,
Chair.
thank you. It is, it's already there. Okay, we'll record that as conveyed there. and we're going to stand adjourned until 4:10. 4:10, please.